walk up the path, taking some keys from his pocket. I followed. The villa was very beautiful. All the windows were closed and shuttered. The man opened the big door. He and the woman began to open the shutters. The rooms were large and the air was dry and dusty. "The Villa Sangaletti is beautiful, signore. Very old," said the man. "The Signor Ashley, this is where he sat. This was his chair." I looked at the chair. I could not think of Ambrose in this house, in this room. I went to the window. Outside there was a little courtyard. It was open to the sky, but shaded from the sun. In the middle of the courtyard there was a fountain and a little pool. A laburnum tree stood beside the pool. Its golden flowers had died, and its small green seeds lay on the ground. "Signor Ashley, he sat here every day," the man said. "He liked to listen to the water falling. He sat there under the tree. In summer they always sat here, Signor Ashley and the Contessa. They drank their tisana here after dinner, day after day, always the same." It was very cool there in the courtyard, and very, very quiet. I thought of how Ambrose had lived at home, walking, riding, always cheerful and busy. "I will show you the room where Signor Ashley died," the man said quietly. I followed him upstairs into the plain, bare room. I looked at the small, hard bed where Ambrose had died. "He died suddenly," the man told me. "He was very weak from the fever, but sometimes he shouts like a madman. Then one morning the Contessa called for me. He was lying very still. It was the sleep of death. He had a peaceful face. The pain and the madness had all gone." "Madness? What do you mean?" I said. "The madness of the fever," the man replied. "He suffered much pain. Sometimes I had to hold him down in his bed. Then came the fever and the madness. I tell you, signore, it was terrible to see." I turned away. "Why was nothing done?" I said. "Why did Mrs. Ashley let him die? What was this illness? How long did it last?" "At the end it was very sudden, like I told you," said the man. "But he had been very ill all winter. And he was sad. All winter he was sad." We walked through another room and out onto a long terrace. In front of us were the most beautiful gardens I had ever seen. "I think," the man said slowly, "that the Contessa will not come back again. Too sad for her. Signor Rinaldi told us that perhaps the villa will be sold." "Who is Signor Rinaldi?" I asked quickly. "He arranges things for the Contessa," the man replied. "Money, business, everything. I give you his address. He speaks English very well." He closed the shutters. We walked downstairs again and stood by the big door. "What happened to his clothes?" I asked. "Where are his books, his papers?" "The Contessa took everything with her." "And you don't know where she went?" I asked. The man shook his head. "She has left Florence. That is all I know. Signor Ashley was buried here in Florence, signore. Then the Contessa left." The woman suddenly spoke to her husband and opened a chest near the wall. She came back carrying a big straw hat, Ambrose's hat, the hat that he had sometimes worn at home in the sun. The woman gave it to me, and I stood there with it in my hands. "Take it with you, signore," the man said softly. "It is yours now." Chapter 4. I meet Rinaldi. On my journey back to Florence, I thought of only one thing. I had to speak to Signor Rinaldi. He must know more about Ambrose's death. The servant at the villa had given me Signor Rinaldi's address. I found the house at last in a quiet, dark street. Signor Rinaldi was at home, and a servant took me to his room. Rinaldi looked surprised when he saw me. He was a thin man, about 40 years old, with a proud, hard face. "My name is Ashley, Philip Ashley," I said. "Yes," Signor Rinaldi answered. "Will you sit down? You are Ambrose Ashley's cousin and his heir. You look very like him. I did not expect to see you here. When did you arrive in Florence?" "This afternoon," I replied. "I have been to the Villa Sangaletti." Signor Rinaldi smiled. "Then you have not seen your cousin Rachel?" he said. "She left Florence very suddenly. Your cousin's death was a great shock to her." "It was a shock to me, too, Signor Rinaldi," I said. "Why wasn't I told about Ambrose's illness?" "Mrs. Ashley always hoped he would get well," Rinaldi answered. "She did not want to worry you." "But I had these letters," I said. "That is why I came to Florence." And I handed Rinaldi the last 2 letters from Ambrose. When he had read them, Signor Rinaldi said slowly, "Yes, the doctors warned Mrs. Ashley of this." "What do you mean?" "They told her that your cousin had a tumour on his brain. That is why he wrote those letters. First the tumour destroyed his brain, and then it killed him." I shook my head. I could not believe it. Rinaldi held out a paper. "This is a copy of the death certificate," he said. "I sent another copy of it to you in Cornwall and one to Mr. Kendall. As your guardian, he had to be told about Ambrose's death." "Mr. Kendall is my guardian?" I asked in surprise. "Ambrose never told me that." "It is in your cousin's will," Rinaldi replied. "Mr. Kendall will explain when you return home." "But what about these letters?" I cried. "Ambrose wrote them to warn me. He was not sick, but in great danger." "Your cousin Ambrose was sick in his mind," Rinaldi answered. "His sickness gave him strange ideas. Because Mrs. Ashley was with him all the time, he suspected her. A sick man often thinks that his dearest friends are his enemies." "If I had been here, Ambrose would be alive now," I said. Rinaldi shook his head. "No," he said, "that is not true. No one could do anything for him." I turned and moved towards the door. "When Mrs. Ashley returns, tell her I know about the letters," I said. "Your cousin Rachel left Florence very suddenly," Rinaldi said. "I do not think she will come back." I walked out of the cold house and into the dark streets. I did not believe Rinaldi's story. Ambrose had died in great pain and unhappiness, and my cousin Rachel had been the cause of his pain. I was sure of that. I promised myself that one day I would bring pain and unhappiness to my cousin Rachel. I would punish this woman who had killed my dear Ambrose, far away from his home and his friends. Chapter 5. An Argument and an Arrival. I arrived home in the first week of September. I had sent letters, and the servants were already dressed in black. My journey to Italy seemed like a dream.